boom, according to that we are live. My name is Yuko Simon. It's good to see you all as always. Got 8 people viewing right now. Hopefully we'll get more people roll in. Remember, if you are watching, say hello. I've got a bit of a goal tonight. There aren't that many topics, but that hasn't stopped the show getting a bit long lately, so I'm going to keep one eye on the time and try to make sure that we get this done with some time to spare. I'd actually like to make a track or do something at the end of the show like I used to do a bit before. So, Andrew Mulboy, good to see you. And on your new iPad with smart keyboard. Oh, that's with the floaty thing. If that's it, that's pretty cool. Yes, good to have everyone here. So at the moment, there's Quint Rankid and Andrea Mulboy, probably some other people there in the chat. We have a boom indeed from Andrea Mulboy and a boom from Jeremiah Kent. Now remember, it's a good way to say hello. Say boom when you come in and join. In the comments, good to see people there. It's been a quiet week news-wise. I have been watching a lot of interesting YouTube content and other creators. Aaron, and indeed another week bites the dust. Will, hello, good to see you. But yeah. Oh, and very very cool sounding keyboard there, Andrea Mulboy. Yeah, that's awesome. I must admit, I'm getting good mileage of my iPad mini, but I do have one eye on when I'm going to get the next iPad Pro. Steve from Berkeley, hello all indeed. Kang and Kodos, you never miss it. Don't worry about it. You are here. You are with the live stream. We are just kicking it off. A boom from Steve from Berkeley. I like it. Everyone's dropping some booms as we join, and I think that's the correct way to join the show. As I said before, the goal tonight, as it is every week, is to actually leave enough time to maybe even make a track at the end of the show. So that was something that I'd like to do. We'll see how we go. Pretty quiet in Melbourne. Lockdown indeed. Going back into lockdown there. It sounds like Korea's going back in. New Zealand has had trouble, of course. So this is the life we are leading right now. And still isn't really clear. I don't like to see news saying that, there could be I remember months ago people saying, hey, we could have a vaccine for this in 2 or 3 months. And, no. Unfortunately, there's no end in sight, and this is going to go well into next year. But we just kind of have to get used to it. I'm looking forward to it being over, no question. But, yeah. Hey, we've got Meepon, a new commenter here. Someone saying there, it's Afred, the founder of Meepon, the world's leading source of anime tourism, which I didn't know was a thing, but good to know that. Followed my content for a while, would like to chat with me. Collaboration would be awesome. Well, Meepon, particularly if you follow me on, the best way to get in touch with me is on Twitter. This is the same to everybody if you'd like to say hello, if you're ever coming to Japan. I'm not a big anime person. I grew up watching anime shows like in Singapore, so I got some of the Japanese shows that weren't available in New Zealand and Australia. But I wouldn't say I'm a big anime person, but that said, I think an anime tourism business is a great idea for a business, and I could actually see that you could actually do some really cool tours just around Tokyo, let alone other places, so I think that's a great idea. Good to have you there in the comments, Meepon, and yeah, I guess that looks like an interesting channel. I assume you have video content, so there's a good new channel for people to follow who are following this, so check that out. We've got Papa Power, that's a new handle. Hope I had a good weekend. I did have a good weekend. Went for a run today. The weather's not been quite so miserable. Still is stinking hot here, by the way, but it's pretty good, so thank you for asking. Tokyo 503, boom. We got a boom from Papa Power as well. We've got a lot of booms. I'm liking all the booms in the comments. Thank you. Thank you for bringing the boom. I guess that's what we do here. We've got Tech Art 2 joining. Howdy to you. Awesome. We've got so many cool people here in the comments. Remember, as always, if you would like to get my attention, if you'd like me to discuss a topic, I do try to pay attention if there's like a super chat, but you don't have to do that. If you @mark Hiko Simon, it will flash orange. You can see whenever if you spell my name correctly, it will flash orange. And if you do that, I will see it, and as you know, I will stop and I will talk forever about anything that you tell me to talk about. But otherwise, I'll go through the topics that I have. Yeah. So that's what I'm about to do. So about to kick it just now. It looks like we are caught up. So boom, let's get into it. Yeah, like I say, not a lot of big news topics this week, but in terms of what we have, first thing is, I don't know if you guys are familiar, well, both of these accounts, I follow these people on Twitter. JJ Walsh, the woman on the left-hand side, She has started live streaming a lot of interviews with people basically in Japan, but not specifically just around YouTube or culture, specifically around environmental awareness and sustainability. Although I must say, Matt Elt isn't necessarily the first person that springs to mind about that, but he is, Matt Elt, the guy on the right, is just like a human encyclopedia. I just realized I don't need to have this in. He's like a human encyclopedia of knowledge of Japanese pop culture and history, and it's kind of funny. He's so knowledgeable that they had a full, extremely interesting hour-long discussion about Japanese pop culture, and were able to even tie it to like environmental sustainability and stuff like that as well. Highlight of this video, the latest video that she's done, and she did these talks she does with everybody. She's a great interviewer, and they come out very well, so I do recommend following. She's on YouTube, she's on Twitter, she streams these things live on Twitter and uploads them onto YouTube. Like 5 of these per week. There's a lot of them, but when I popped in and checked them out, they've all been really good. What I love about this particular interview, and why you should follow Matt Elt and you should subscribe to JJ Walsh. He was talking about how in 1945, in December 1945, apparently the first thing manufactured in Japan after World War II was there was a toy maker. Apparently before World War II, Japan was actually known not just for kimonos and silks, but also for toys. Japan exported a lot of toys. And one of these sort of artisanal toy makers who was working in Japan's war production machine during World War II, when he went back to looking for work after the war, he wanted to go back to making toys, which he traditionally made out of tin, but there was no material. Everything had been like subsumed by the Japanese war machine, so there was nothing that he could make anything with. And this was like just when GHQ was coming in and the occupation was starting. So he went up to a US base and he asked if he could collect all of their garbage and process their garbage, and from that he took all these tin cans, all these used tin cans from the US soldiers, and he actually crafted them into a Willy Jeep, the World War II US Jeep. And the story's amazing. I mean, the details it's such an like I say, I'm just riffing it now. I haven't written it down or anything. I just find it so memorable. Like this old Japanese toy making artisan, he, in order to figure, he wanted to get the details of the Jeep so precise, which he made by cutting up tin cans. He made these perfect Jeeps, which were sold in like department stores. And sold hundreds of thousands of them. To measure the Jeep properly, while he was in the US base, he used like a furoshiki, a towel, like from a centaur, which he used to actually measure. He'd count the number of like towel lengths that different parts of the truck were, of the Jeep were. I mean, that and every other part of Japanese like pop culture history you ever wanted to know. Matt Elt is a great person actually just to listen to or follow. And the interview was awesome, and she's done a bunch of these. I find the environmental stuff, I suppose, kind of interesting because it used to be my thing. It hasn't been my thing for a long time now, not since 2006. So my information is not up to date, but I kind of respect what she is doing. And this is the thing, there are a lot of really innovative and interesting people in this field in Japan. So something good to follow, some good content there, and a good video there. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. Sergeant Bilko, glad that you made it. Thank you for the @ mark. And Hiko-sama, maybe he has a photographic memory too. You mean Matt Elt, possibly? Certainly not me, but maybe he does. If it's interesting enough, it certainly is good to see. King of Kanto, hey bro. Yeah, bro. King of Kanto, that's a handle name I don't recognize, but welcome, Your Majesty. Good to have you here joining us here in the comments. Nice. Hey bro, are you from New Zealand? That's a bit of a Kiwi welcome. Aisatsu is what's in my head. I'm trying to translate myself, but JJ Walsh is definitely very interesting, and actually she's mostly on Twitter, but I noticed that she started a YouTube channel that has like 2 subscribers. Oh yeah, one other thing, by the way, I didn't actually realize this, but apart from the fact that this Tokyo Tonight Topics has 357 followers, I don't really pay much attention to how many followers I have on Flipboard. Honestly, I don't even think of it as much of a social network. But I just noticed today, I had some notification from Flipboard saying, congratulations, you have 900 followers on Flipboard. And I'm like, I didn't realize I had that many followers. So I went to look at how many followers I had, and it said I had 998 followers on Flipboard. Apart from the fact that it's a great app, and of course you can follow these topics and read and look at these videos yourself if you do that. It's right here. I'm just flipping. I curate these every week, but out of the hundreds of tweets that I do, I sort of pick out the ones that I think are worth talking about. If two more people follow me, I get 1,000. Doesn't really mean anything. It's just a nice round number. It's a nice milestone. I don't know why, Andrea Mobile, I don't know why that's censoring you, but butter stocks are good, actually. I've had good butter this week. We've had, in spite of Obon, I've been able to, the bread shop has just reopened, and I've been eating butter like it's going out of style, which it never, of course, will, because butter is awesome in spite of the fact it's hard to get here because of the Stalinist production system that's used for it. But yes, they're good. They're good. They're keeping up. Japanese for morons. Victor, good to see you, man. Yo, lots of yo-yos in there. Yo-yo man from way back. Victor, excellent to see you there in the comments. DJ Sunnyside Up, hey, made a couple of new breaks. I admit I've gotten a bit busy with work, and I kind of, like the last month, I haven't made any new tracks, but DJ Sunnyside Up, who is now also a member of the Tokyo Digital crew, he's been sharing all sorts of stuff. A good person to follow on Facebook and on SoundCloud, actually. And been enjoying your stuff, man. And great to see that you are keeping up your routine of making new tracks like so regularly. So that's pretty cool. We have awesome there, Victor, in the comments. Good to see you there. So anyway, that's the first one. Normally, I always I look at the clock after the first story and after the chats, and I see it's like 10:50, and I'm, oh crap, it's 20 minutes in and only one story, but 10:42, I'm doing good, I'm going to keep going fast. This is super interesting to me as a New Zealander. If you're from New Zealand or Australia, probably more so New Zealand. Australia's not very good at this sort of thing. But yeah, this is actually super interesting and super familiar. There is a thing. Hokkaido was it was colonized late. It was colonized in the 19th century, and actually over hundreds of years, sort of gradually. There were outposts. Japan actually had samurai like bases there during the shogunate and whatever. But Ainu was still like a kind of the correct way to describe them now would be an indigenous people like Maori, but in truth they were almost like a separate kind of sovereignty within Japan that was kind of getting pushed back and back and back by Japan, modern Japan. And it wasn't really until the 19th century that Japan, as in modern Japan, sort of managed to take over full control over all territories. And the Ainu were put into reservations, not unlike what was done in the United States and New Zealand and Australia. They were sort of given territories that they were allowed to remain in. But these people had actually lived in Hokkaido and even in Honshu, actually over for hundreds of years, and were ethnically very distinct from the Yamato Japanese that came across from China and Korea and Mongolia and whatnot. So their position within Japan is in many ways very much like indigenous New Zealanders, like Maori people who came to New Zealand. Hundreds of years, not thousands of years, but they came a good hundreds of years before Europeans did, and had themselves property ownership and fishing and all these sorts of rights that sort of existed, independent of European control in New Zealand. And Japan was the same thing. I mean, Ainu had their own society and culture and laws and practices and culture, which all existed independently, of course, of Japanese. And Japanese didn't really take this over fully, again, like in America, until the 19th century. So they've brought a court case pointing out that there are limits, fishing quotas on the number of salmon that you can take. By the way, in the story, the full story, well, not the full story, but the end of the story on colonization of Hokkaido was that in the end, Ainu were basically declared Japanese, the same as everyone else. There were sort of land reservations given, but they were basically all to take Japanese names, and there would be no distinction from this day forward. You're all Japanese. Now, in some ways, that could be seen as kind of enlightened. That is actually better treatment, arguably, than in New Zealand. Maori were New Zealand citizens, but in Australia, they were not given full citizenship rights for a long time. In America, it was complicated as well, where they actually allowed them to remain sort of separate. But in Japan, they just said, no, you're all just Japanese now, forget about all that stuff, we're all the same. And that in itself is kind of good. But, of course, the problem is that, so there's a case being brought now, which is where Ainu have been told that they need permits for fishing, in traditional fishing, like rivers and whatnot, for salmon. And they argue that their rights are not subject to the, they have fishing rights based on their own laws and their own culture and their own practices of preserving fish stocks, which predate colonization. And those haven't been extinguished. So they're actually going to court in Tokyo to affirm that their rights to fish in their own traditional areas predate colonization by Japanese, by Yamato Japanese, and that those rights weren't extinguished by colonization. You know, the same, just like in the Mabo case in Australia. You know, which is kind of, again, in New Zealand. New Zealand was established on the basis of recognizing that Maori owned land to begin with, you know, and that everything had to be bought from them. Australia was founded on the very different basis that the land was all empty or not owned by anybody. And the problem was there were parts of Australia, including in the Torres Strait, where there were people who did clearly own land. They could define what the land was, and they had that outside of the Australian Land Register, which didn't recognise that natives could, you know, that Indigenous Australians and natives in their old language could own land. And the Mabo case in Australia was a similar case where someone said, government says that my land isn't my land. I've been living on this land for hundreds of years, and all of a sudden I'm told it's not mine. I have land rights that predate colonization. And although the foundation of Australia was based on not recognizing this, it was so clear in this particular case that the Supreme Court in Australia had to recognize it, which actually undermined the entire foundational principle of how Australia was colonized. So Japan is kind of getting a case like that. It isn't about land ownership, it's about fishing rights. But there's an argument that they have indigenous rights to fishing predating colonization in the 19th century by Yamato Japan. And it's actually legally, like I said, I spent 5 years at law school in New Zealand, and we study this because this is constitutional law for us, and it's very, very similar here in Japan. Yet at the same time, in Japan, the approach to Ainu and Okinawan and other minorities is to kind of say that they don't exist, and not in the sense of denying that they ever existed, but more, we're all the same now. Like, whatever we all come from different backgrounds, we're all Japanese now, and you're just the same as me, and you don't have different rights, which is kind of good and bad. But they're actually challenging this legally, and it's really, really interesting. Dan H, good to see you, Dan H. Is there mostly ethnic Ainu people left? Because I have come across, most I've come across seem to be mixed race. Yeah, there was a thing, there was a horrible World's Fair in America, I think in like the early 1900s, where they actually had like human exhibits, like where they had African pygmies and they had Ainu people, and Ainu people were like ethnographically super interesting to a lot of people. So, at this time when eugenics and when Darwinism was just catching on at the end of the 19th century, sort of Ainu were considered to be European-looking people who lived in Asia, and some people thought, oh, these might be the descendants of the I hate to use the term Aryan because it's been kind of misused, but the Indo-Europeans, the people who went from Central Asia into Europe. There was some people who believed that Ainu were like a remnant of those people who went into Europe from Central Asia. I have been to Lake Akanko in Hokkaido. I've been to an Ainu village, had a great time talking with the people there. Found actually the culture, a lot resonated from my experiences in New Zealand actually. The people there, I didn't find any, to me they didn't look any different to normal Japanese. I've actually known people with mixed Ainu heritage. I think the other thing is that like pure Ainu are very, very rare nowadays. I think, again, it was encouraged that they were just assimilated into Japanese society. It's like with anything, the whole thing that Japan is a melting pot in spite of what people believe. There's NHK's done a lot of great documentaries on this, that when they actually check the DNA of people in Japan and different regions of Japan, they find Filipino, they find Taiwanese, like indigenous Taiwanese, not Han, not Chinese migrant, but actually predating that, which is more like Indonesian. They find Siberian, they find Mongol, they find all sorts of Japan it's not as simple as one tribe going into Japan, as much as that's a story that gets told. It's not true. With Ainu as well, they didn't look distinct to regular Japanese people to me at all. Although the traditional idea is that they were distinct in the old days because they had tattoos. Again, very reminiscent to me for Maori people. They had facial tattoos and whatnot. They supposedly have more distinct, like they have a bridge on their eyebrows, which Japanese don't typically have. But again, the people I met were all, they looked totally typically Japanese. They were hairy and they had tattoos. So they were kind of European looking to Europeans, but apparently Even this, from what I've seen in documentaries, in spite of their European sort of appearance, there's no shared genetics or anything. It's just sort of how people, then their closest ties, of course, are with people in Siberia, it seems. Super interesting. So yeah, really interesting. Hey, we've got Jason's All Sumo channel. Great to have you there in the comments. And the Red Value, excellent to see you. And passing the love back. Nice to get some love. Boom to everybody who is coming late. Remember, as always, indeed, it's nice to see people throwing comments at me so I can check. 11:43 p.m. there in Australia. Thank you for letting me know. Dan H, thanks for the comments. And we've got Andrew Mulbert. Probably Marlborough is similar in Australia, but wouldn't say it works by any times for Indigenous land. Yeah, well, like I said, Marlborough was like a baby step, toe in the pool. Australia's got a long way to go on that, but yeah, this is something similar to that. It's the idea of recognizing legal rights that predate colonization, which Japan has the same thing, and so to me this is a super interesting case. Okay, I took a lot of time on that one. Next story. In spite of COVID, although this is for last year, I suppose, Japan still has one of the greatest, hey, Ras Al Ghul, I'll be right there, still has one of the greatest life expectancies in Japan, in the world. So 87.45 years for women and 81.4 years for men. Actually, apparently the US life expectancy for men is 78 years, so it's 3 years longer in Japan, which I hope applies to just like living here. Actually, tonight on Sekai no Ima, on the NHK news summary show that they have every week, my son was watching and they were talking about Biden and Trump. And I asked the lad, I said, he kind of watched it, I said, so who do you like better? And he's like, yeah, Biden. I was like, why Biden? He was like, oh, I don't know. I thought, wow, you really get it. That's exactly correct. It's like everybody, it's like Biden. You ask them why, it's I don't know. It's funny, my son, like in 10 minutes of a Japanese children's show news show, he basically reached the same place of understanding of American politics of like everybody in America that I know, so that was interesting. Let the games begin. Ras Al Ghul. Did I see the new Batman trailer? I have not seen it. And Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League. I haven't seen them. Have people seen them? I would. I feel bad because that was like. I haven't seen them and I don't know. I've got to check those out. I will watch those. Jason's All Sumo channel. You're a movie connoisseur. The Rock is coming back as Black Adam. Okay, it sounds like I've got to check out The Rock. The Rock actually went to school in Auckland, right near where my high school was actually. So that was kind of cool, even though he was there for a short time. So yeah. The Red Value. How many fried chickens did I ever manage to eat in one sitting? That's an odd question. I can eat a lot of fried chicken more, but I never feel good about it afterwards. Actually, Jonah Lomu, there was a story of Jonah Lomu eating like 50 pieces of chicken or something. A famous New Zealand rugby player who actually died of a kidney disease, and I worry that was part of the reason why, but he was like gigantic. He could run 100 meters in 10.3 seconds, and he weighed 120 kilograms and was 2 meters tall. He was like, he was an incredible like rugby player, and he was famous for eating a lot of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Salvis Musician, excellent to see. Does that mean that if you live in Japan and live all your life and eat exclusively Japanese food, you'll live as long? You'd say yes. Yeah, I kind of think so. I mean, certainly Japanese food generally not. I mean, look, there's all kinds of Japanese food, and there's healthy and non-healthy Japanese food. If you're going to 7-Eleven every day, I doubt you're going to quite reach your 87.5 or 81.4, but generally speaking, yeah. And it's not just that, it's not just Japanese food. Fresh food is readily available. People buy from the supermarket and they cook, and the quality of food is amazing. If you're eating processed food, which you can get everywhere here as well, I mean, that's crap, and you would... And I'm pretty sure, like on Osaka type, like heavy, thick, sort of sweet sauces and stuff like that, delicious, but probably not going to make you live to 100. But down in Okinawa, where they eat like, Goya and tofu and stuff like that, yeah, you're probably going to get to be a good age down there. Andrea asks, how old is my son now? Always seems like he is young. The lad is 10. Which, yeah, it's funny. I mean, you've all been with me on the journey, including discovering that he was on the way. So that says something about how long I've been doing this. He is a big lad now. Aaron is asking, what is the news show for my kiddo? Where can you access it? It's called Sekai no Ima. It's on NHK1 at 6 on NHK1 on Sunday evenings. And it's, to me, in spite of some of the trouble that they got into recently talking about Black Lives Matter, where they oversimplified some very sensitive issues, it is still, for me, the best news show on Japanese TV, and I mean that as an adult. What I love about it is that where news just normally says, hey, this is the news that happened every day, this show, they pick out 2, sometimes 3 topics each week, normally overseas topics, but sometimes Japan topics, and sometimes hard topics, but they explain it, they break it down, and they explain it in a way that you're supposed to watch it. It used to be aimed at primarily at kids. They've actually kind of done away with the kids focus. They don't have kids on it anymore, but they do make it like a family show, and the idea is to make news understandable. And they actually do what news doesn't normally do. They actually break it down, and they do excellent explanations. They really do. And I think it's one of the best things on TV. And this is the point. I mean, my son was basically 10 minutes of watching this, sufficiently informed to know to shrug his shoulders and say, yeah, Biden, why not? Which I thought was remarkable. So yes, double digits, 10 is a good, indeed, well 10 is pretty good, although yes, that's right, it gets bumpy from here on out. So that is some good news. This was an interesting Gaijin blog by, now I realize I'm in trouble by, I'm sure I'm going to butcher this, Cyril Ugnon Cusios. That is a fascinating name. Kind of French looking, but don't know where that name is from. That is kind of cool. I wish I had a name like that. And yeah, just in terms of my take on this blog, worth a read. Humility is better than confidence. This is a funny one. I remember my very first job where I think I'm from the school where, you know, my first job ever, the idea is to be positive and energetic and, you know, showing confidence all the time. And I've been in Japan too long. I know how I would look at myself the way I was acting now, like having been in Japan too long. And, you know, acting confident when people know that you don't know, but you acting like you know. People like get more worried by that. People are not assured by confidence. They are much more assured by people saying, yeah, I'm not sure, I'll do my best. I don't know. Rather than say, yeah, leave it to me, rakusho, easy win. You know, if you say that, they'll be like, okay, I think maybe we should stop. They react with nervousness towards confidence. Yeah, and I react nervously towards confidence now as well. So one is definitely very true. 2, don't underestimate the power of the nomikai. I've talked about this before, the nominucation thing. I am not a fan of it. I don't like to do it. But yes, it is important. I think it's less important now than it used to be. Now you go to nomikais and it's actually, for a start, socially acceptable to order tea. Like there'll often be like a jockey, like a big like jug of tea that people will drink, which used to be people who couldn't drink, like really couldn't drink, used to be forced to drink. So it's a lot better. And that's made it a lot nicer. There's no more mandatory karaoke either, which I kind of miss, but I think it's the right thing because a lot of people are uncomfortable. This is true as well, and it goes a little bit back to the confidence thing. If you show confidence and you act confident and it turns out that you're wrong about that, yeah, that's like, trust is easy to lose and hard to earn, right? And that's where it comes. People will not trust you if you act confident about something that you shouldn't be confident about, and if you screw up, yeah, it's hard to get that trust back, and that is definitely true. Cleaning the toilet will help cleanse your mind. I've never cleaned a toilet at an office, and I don't know where this person was working. I know that in schools they make kids do this, but yeah, I've never done that, and that is a strange thing. Not that I have any problem cleaning a toilet here. I guess I'm getting used to I'm used to cleaning the toilet for family members, but doing it for workmates, I'm not so sure about it. Playing the Gaijin card is okay sometimes. Not only is it okay, it's actually expected sometimes. People want you to use it sometimes. I try not to overdo it, but certainly, yeah, I used it to get out of nomikais, for example, or pretending not to understand things. Yeah, I think that's an essential thing. And a compassionate approach to personal and health issues. For me, I only know working in Japan. I can't compare to other countries. So while they say here having a year's parental leave for like a maternity or paternity leave is wonderful, I'm like, yeah, of course, those are normal things. So to me, it's not so much that I think that Japanese rights are great. I think American rights are just shockingly bad when I hear about how tough it is there. So other way around. Well, yeah. generally agree with the insights, except the toilet cleaning thing. I didn't really understand that, but yep. I saw some comments swinging by, so let's go back up. Dan H, do you know what happened to Langley Esquire? They seem to have disappeared for a year, and they were one of the few good insights into Japan. Do I know any other people who do similar stuff? Yes, I do. I've talked here before about Tokyo Wave, so I don't know what happened to Langley Esquire. I assume that there's only so many diplomats in Tokyo. He specializes in that field of embassies and diplomats. I hope he's back with that soon. I know that someone who was involved with Langley Esquire went on to start the Tokyo Wave podcast. He was a producer of the Langley show. He wasn't in front of it. Not many people seem to follow Tokyo Wave, but it's an hour long. It is podcast format, but it is on YouTube as well. You can look it up, Tokyo Wave. They've got this Miami Vice-ish blue and sort of pink sort of background, neon background. And again, it's just a graphic. They don't normally even post video with the show, which would be kind of fun to show video actually. But yeah, they're posting. They're pretty good. JJ Walsh, who I put at the very who I introduced at the very start of this. In fact, I talked in the beginning. She's an excellent person to follow. She's been prolific with interviews lately of really interesting people doing mainly environment and sustainability related backgrounds in Japan, although not in this case. Of course, NonNative Creative is posting again. Highly recommend that. So yeah, there are other people around like that, definitely. Yeah, again, follow me on Twitter, and I will share whenever I find people like that who I think are good. But definitely yes, Tokyo Wave, JJ Walsh, NonNative Creative, for me the big ones at the moment for people who sort of put out, again, Langley Esquire is Langley Esquire. There's nothing exactly like that, but those three are very good and sort of have some overlap. Generally better informed than me. Also, Andrea Moboy, you watched Paolo from Tokyo's latest video yesterday, Day in the Life of a Japanese Space Engineer. Really cool. I've seen Paolo from Tokyo's videos. I must admit, I haven't found anything. I've looked at his channel, and I've not really been drawn too much into specific videos that I've looked at, but a Japan Space Engineer is something that is interesting to me, so thank you for the heads up. I will go and check that out. Japanese for Morons. By the way, Victor and everyone else, if you want to get my attention at Mark Kiko Simon, if you're saying that to me, and I will notice it. So if you're saying that to me, can I explain the confidence thing? Yeah, I can explain that. Oh, by the way, Mogberry Pie, excellent to see you there in the comments. The confidence thing is more about, coming back to this, that in the corporate context, and now I say this as a manager who has become this way myself, there's this kind of, the Japanese work is this artisanal culture. There's this culture, even when you're not making, craft pottery or anything like that. Basically, everybody sort of aspires to think and act like that. And it means that there's a fair degree of hazing and bullying of junior and new members. There's an assumption, again, when you're in New Zealand or America, whatever, you go and get a degree in computer science, and when you start working, the expectation is from day one that you will be a computer scientist. In a law firm, you get a law degree. My first day where I worked in a US law firm, my first day I was thrown straight into drafting, agreements, because it was assumed I just got admitted to become a lawyer, be a lawyer already. In Japan, this never happens. If you get lawyers are presumed to be blank slates, and whatever information they have from university, where it's just assumed that they did no study and drank, which is true most of the time, or if they've come from other companies or whatever, any information that they have is presumed to be like corrupting and wrong, and you've got to get rid of that. And they kind of want people to go back to being an empty vessel and to start learning from their boss and learning from day one. And this is why in Japanese companies they start people up really slowly. And what they are looking for is not someone to come in and say, hey, I got this, I can do this. They want someone who appears like an empty vessel, who is going to be receptive to everything that they will teach them and do things exactly the way that they are taught to do it, and sort of to be obedient and to follow and to build up a craft by following their sort of superiors. So somebody who's new, who's young, and comes in and wants to say, hey, leave it to me, I've got it. You imagine a craftsman and having a young person come in who's learning the trade, and they and talks like this to the old craftsman. The old craftsman's going to say, you know what, you'd better shut up and listen and watch before you start thinking you can do this sort of thing, Sonny Jim. And that's where the confidence thing, it's kind of funny. It's like acting humble is one way of putting it, literally acting unconfident. is actually a sign of reassurance to a lot of Japanese managers. They'll prefer to see someone who is, because the assumption is that if they're nervous, they're going to listen. And that's what they really want. You know, in Japan, listening is really important. And not just listening, but when you speak, rather than launching straight into a counterpoint, you're not allowed to make any point yourself until you demonstrate that you've actually listened and understood first. And if you launch into a counterpoint, it'll be disregarded and ignored, and or banged back into you the original point. So, you know, you have to start with saying, okay, I get what you're saying just now. You said this, this, and this, and that's because I should do it this way. But how about doing this? If you just launched into, but how about doing this? The assumption is that you're not listening and you're an arrogant little shit. And I must admit, I've been hazed this way myself, and I look at people this way. It's got its merits. It means that everything gets done more slowly. The idea of tossing someone in the deep end to learn is also definitely not something that happens very much in Japan. That's what I mean about the confidence thing, Victor. So hope that makes some sense. Back to the topics. Also, the red value. This is exactly the reason I left Japan, Hikozamen. I know what I'm doing, and I wouldn't be able to do the work I wanted to do starting out my career in Japan. The red value. This is a very common story. I remember when I was starting as an IT consultant, I had a law degree. So when I started as an IT consultant, of course I wasn't going to be arrogant because I had no idea what I was doing. But I had a co-hire who was from MIT, a computer scientist, and he was getting treated sort of the same as me. And he was saying, I have a master's of computer science from MIT. I know more than these people, and they're asking me to do filing, and they're sort of hazing me with routine work and telling me, and when I said when I told HR that I wanted to do a job more related to computer science, they said, yeah, but you don't really do anything at university, do you? By HR. That was back in the bad old days, but it's better than that now, but not much better. So yeah, I totally get it, actually. It's one thing actually that I appreciate. Not all Japanese companies are like that, but it is very much part of the culture. And it's something that I appreciate about foreign companies, at least real foreign companies, that they'll throw you into it more, which is what I like. But even foreign companies, if they're staffed by Japanese people that think this way, it's hard to escape that way of thinking. Other comments, Quentin Rankett, delivery robots, what are the liability policies like? Good question, I'll get to that in a moment. Delivery robots, they need a mouth and a smile. Okay, we're going to get to the delivery robots. It seems people are definitely going for this. Kang and Kodos, there are hidden rules in Japan that most people have a hard time coming to terms with because a lot of it is just something they made up over a real law or a rule. That is absolutely correct. And this is also why people get hazed. Young people get hazed. This is the thing. This is the most shocking thing to me when I got to Japan. I assumed that the reason I didn't know the rules was because I wasn't Japanese and people in Japan will grow up learning these rules. They do not. People who come out of universities in Japan, I describe them actually as like newborn deer. They come into companies and they're treated like they can't do anything. But because everyone treats them like that and society looks at them that way, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They really are dogs. I mean, a lot of them are just like walking around bumping in. They literally bump into people because they're too nervous to look up. And this is why I call them newborn deer. It's like they don't even know how to walk. And this whole thing about like business etiquette and customs and behavior changes company to company, and the way that you say hello to people, the way you describe colleagues on emails, totally varies. I've experienced this. There's a lot of hidden rules. It's hard coming into the culture, but it's not just coming into the culture from overseas. It's even coming in from a university or from a different company. It's tough, but the diligence and the more that you know those unwritten rules, that implies the more that you've had time to soak up the culture and you get the rules and you get all the understandings. And this is again why you can never be confident. If you show confidence without knowing those things, the assumption is even if what you're saying makes sense, you're clueless because you don't know the rule about using the fax machine. So you need to shut up and not say anything for another 3 years. That's the attitude, and it's wrong. It's artisanal, right? So there's some pride in it, and Japanese artisans are crazy, good at what they do, but it's the wax on, wax off stuff, right? They drive you nuts getting there. And that is absolutely a very real part of the culture. Steve from Berkeley, your daughter is just watching my show for the first time. It isn't too much out of the way to talk about what made me move to Japan. Thank you. Okay. I love that lots of people, by the way, I love that you can see how, and JZM, good to see you, JZM, another name in the comment I haven't said hello to yet. I love that you're being so interactive and giving me questions tonight, although you're challenging me because I promised I was going to get through the topics with enough time to make a music track at the end of it. Yes, why did I come to Japan? Lack of sheep. I'm from New Zealand. Everybody in New Zealand leaves. So most people go to UK or Australia because they're culturally very similar and they pay more money in Australia and in UK. And from UK, most of us have 1 or 2 generations only in New Zealand, so myself included. In fact, my father has a British passport, so I could live in UK without any problem, or Australia. You can go over there, you can earn more money. From UK, of course, you can access Europe easily, so you can do lots of travel, you can get a pretty good job. British people seem to like New Zealand accents. We do better than Australians, or at least we get less bullied by immigration. And we often get quite good jobs over there, in law firms, getting money that you can never get in New Zealand. So there's kind of a thing. It's New Zealand. We actually call it the OE, the overseas experience. Everybody leaves the country, and if a percentage comes back, but a percentage doesn't come back. So we're always trying to replace the people who don't come back to New Zealand from when they go on their overseas experience with immigration, which we're very open to in New Zealand. So for myself, part of it was, but why did I come to Japan? A couple of reasons. First of all, I lived in Singapore when I was a kid, and I wanted to learn Chinese. The chance didn't come up, but in the late 1980s, New Zealand was sort of pivoting when we had UK cutting off all of its butter sales and all of its agricultural imports from New Zealand because it was joining the EU, and New Zealand had all of this butter to sell. Well, we didn't succeed at selling as much of it to Japan as I wanted, but we certainly succeeded at selling apples and kiwi fruit and all this other stuff to Japan. So the New Zealand government was like, okay, we're going to teach everybody, because we all saw Rising Sun. We all saw every 1980s cliche movie about how Japan was economically going to take over the world. So the New Zealand government was like, okay, everybody, we're all going to learn Japanese now. And I was in that wave. Now they're teaching Chinese to everybody, but in my time they were teaching everyone Japanese. I wanted to learn Chinese, but Japanese was the only thing on the menu. I learned it, I liked it. And when everyone was making their plans at university, either to take a gap year in university, or more commonly after they graduate university to go traveling for a year or two, for me it was always like, well, I don't want to go where everyone else is going. I want to go where there is a few people that I know is possible and there's some adventure and something interesting. And I really made up my mind. I went on a high school exchange to Japan, and I thought, wow, this place is pretty cool. I'm going to go here. And pretty much from 15 I made up my mind. I didn't go until I was 23. But all through university, all my part-time jobs, I got a job at a Japanese souvenir shop so I could improve my Japanese and save money. It was all for years. It was building up to coming to Japan. And the other thing about coming to Japan for me was, in New Zealand, we're all very well educated. We don't have any real news of our own, so we all follow international news, international politics. We are well educated. We use Google, we use Apple. But all of these things that we love, this is why New Zealand is a great movie maker. It's because we are frustrated because we're too small. In my time, 4 million, now it's getting up to 5 million, but I always think of New Zealand as a 3 million person country. That is like the furthest, most isolated country in the world, and it's really frustrating to be like that. So for me, I was like, I want to be king of the world. I want to work for a massive, famous company doing amazing things and changing the world. And in New Zealand, those companies might have 2 or 3 salespeople. They might have a sales office or a distribution office or something, but you don't really get to really do those things. You have to go to America. You have to go to Europe. And I always thought, well, if I get really good at Japanese, I could go to Japan and join either a Japanese multinational or a multinational that needs a Japanese-speaking, person who speaks English as a native language. That was the plan when I came to Japan. And I thought, when I got to Japan, I was like, well, I'm not going to be valuable to, Evil Corp, to multinationals unless, they're not going to hire a New Zealander who's lived in Japan over an American who's got the same skills. So I've got to beat those Americans, and I'm not going to beat them by being a better lawyer or having more brains than them. If it was that, I'd just go straight to America. But I thought if I can be better at Japan and better at Japanese than them, if I can have deeper understanding, if I invest in that, that'll be my differentiator. So I got to Japan and I was like, I'm just going to dive into Japanese companies. I'm going to turn down opportunities to work in international companies or in English-speaking projects. I always chose to be the only foreigner on all the projects that I was on, and I went for the hardest core Japanese experience ever, hoping as an investment that suffering that I intentionally put myself through meant that when I freed myself from that and I joined an international, Western law firm and then an IT company later on as a legal person, that I had the benefit of all this experience that would allow me to work better with Japanese people than your foreigner from your famous country could come from. So I basically had to make myself better, and the way I chose to make myself better and to get these opportunities to work in these multinationals that don't exist in my country was to really focus at being really good with the Japanese stuff. And that's what I come here and talk about now. I invested all this time in it, and I do use it every day in my job. And yeah, that's what I like to think. I'm sort of, as a lawyer or an IT consultant or whatever, I'm kind of mediocre, but the Japanese thing is my differentiator, and that's gotten me into jobs that I could not have gotten in New Zealand, and that's why I stay here. And I love the place. That's the other reason, of course. So, C from Berkeley, my pleasure to answer the question for your daughter. Japan is just awesome to me. It's like, to tell you the truth, to put it really simply, it's really hard. If I went to America and I wanted to be a lawyer in an IT company in America, I'm competing against 350 million people, a large percentage of whom are smarter than me. America has infinite lawyers, infinite genius lawyers. I've worked with some of them, and they're crazy. I don't deserve to be working with people as smart as the people that I work with. I have this imposter syndrome thing. But I'm where I am because I'm good enough as a lawyer. In America, I'd be very middle of the road. I'd be suburban, law firm or whatever. But I know stuff about working and being effective in Japan and making international companies effective in Japan and making Japanese companies effective internationally that other people don't have. And when I combine that with the skill that I have from New Zealand that I got of studying law and getting a good law degree from a pretty good university there, in Japan, the value of that multiplies. And so, it's kind of like hitting them where they ain't. It's the patent strategy of not going for where all the people are. It's picking out a niche that will allow you to do something really, really awesome that doesn't require as much competition. And that's what motivated me to go really deep with Japanese and to motivate myself to be really good with IT and to be really good with my chosen profession. Hope that answers. Yeah, good question. Always very happy to answer that. Tech Art 2, are contractors treated the same way as being hired to convert a system to cloud? Yeah, contractors are tough. IT contractors in particular are not treated well in Japan, and they're not treated as experts. They are often, depending on who's contracting with them, it obviously depends. I hate it when I see subcontractors getting mistreated and abused, but it happens. Japanese customers, like non-IT companies that procure IT services, contractors and abuse of subcontractors is such a problem in Japan that there's a specific law to protect subcontractors from it. That said, all of the most talented programmers and system engineers that I knew all struck out, incorporated their own companies, but they were able to do that based on being known as being the best engineers and knowing that the companies that they worked for would pay for them as a subcontractor, even if they stopped being an employee, in which case they get a lot more money. So for the really, really good ones, it's a really good way to go. But it's a double-edged sword, I guess. I guess to be an effective subcontractor, you already need to have that trust and be proven, and then generally that requires you get that experience first. There's no skipping that. But there again, and that's the challenge, I suppose, for foreign companies that want to come to Japan, where they don't have those credentials and built-up trust. What Japanese companies will do, the equivalent of hazing of the junior in Japan, is that Japanese companies will make you do free work, which they'll say is to prove yourself and to build trust. But that is also frequently abused, and that's why there's this law protecting subcontractors, which is actually making it harder now to use them for that. But yeah, so it's tough. But if you can succeed, if you can get that trust, it's a pretty good way to go. And I know people that have done it successfully. Wow, so many awesome questions tonight. This is cool. I'm gonna keep going back. Mulberry Pie. I feel like if they throw you into it, you can learn more and learn faster. That's what I agree with, and that's definitely what I found after going through 2 Japanese companies where I was just sat at a desk and kind of told to take my time and to ease into it. And then I went to an American company where I was just thrown straight into it. Absolutely, I learned faster, and I was trusted to do more faster. And with that trust, you respond to it and work better. So yeah, absolutely, I agree. Aaron, we called a lot of Japanese salarymen pencil pushers back in the day. And it's kind of funny. I've just said all of this, and I kind of agree with you, but at the same time, having been there, I remember when I was an IT consultant at a Japanese company, and I went out drinking with foreigners, and they said, yeah, but they sit there and they work long hours, but they're not really doing anything. And the inner salaryman was unleashed. I was like, we're working very hard, thank you very, very much. And if we could go home, we would. And we're not just looking for lazy shortcuts here. I almost called them a lazy gaijin, in the sense that I was kind of like, it's not productive. It is slow. It is torturing. It is waxing on and waxing off. But it's not like we're doing nothing. It's not like the work we're doing is meaning. You can't do it if you think it's meaningless, right? It has a purpose to it, which is to become very, very good at what you do and not be sloppy about it. So it's got its own. There is a pride to the way the Japanese do things. And when I felt like I was targeted by a comment like that, I became very defensive about it. This is the investment. I learned to understand that, and I learned to be able to talk with people thinking that but not phrasing it that way. And I'm very glad I got out of it. It's a tough one. There's definitely a lot of pencil pushing. That is definitely a thing, however, that happens in Japan. Andrew Moria, butter, yes, we need to use that. Yes, makes sense. That's why you worked overseas for a number of years to get different experience out of Australia. Exactly, which is a good thing to get. By the way, Christopher Luke, thank you. Hiko is pattern indeed. Hit them where they ain't. The pattern strategy. Andrea, my boy, have a good night. Free work indeed. Grumpy face. Mr. Cordychap. That's why there is a law against it, because that's such a thing. And this is where I wanted the show to be over, but you all asked such awesome questions, and that is okay. So I'm going to keep pushing forward. There are robots. They kind of have faces. I think someone said they have to have faces. Well, look at them. They have faces. They're like cars and whatever. I don't know how this is going to work. It doesn't make sense. It's probably less efficient. But I don't care. This is why I moved to Japan, because it's dumb and it's futuristic and it's techno and it's cool, and I want all my mail to be delivered by like this. Even though I live like on top of a building, I don't know how they're going to get all the mail up or put it into my post box in the right box or whatever in my apartment building, which is what most people live in Japan. I have no idea how this can work. In fact, I'm sure there's probably going to be like 4 people walking around each robot to actually distribute the mail when they arrive. I'm pretty sure this is going to be less efficient than just delivering it in the normal way, but nonetheless, I'm so glad that they're doing it. Thank you. This is why I love Japan. This is why I moved here. Recon the Ferry. And everyone, remember, if you want to direct a question to me at Markiko Simon, it will flash orange like Andrea's thing does, and then I will answer it. But you're lucky. Recon the Ferry. Excellent to have you here in the comments, and I see you asking the questions, so I will answer it. How do companies view experience versus grades? You're in a university and you're a very good student, but your extracurricular and job student experience stands out much more in Japan. Good question. The jobs that I've worked in lately, I have not hired new graduates. So in terms of new grad hiring, my first job in Japan, I was hired effectively as a new grad, and all my co-hires were new grads. So I can talk about that, but that's like 20 years old, so I'm worried it's out of date. What I was told back in the day, I don't think it's so much like this now. First of all, grades don't matter. It just matters what university you're from, and they don't. And again, as I was talking about earlier, the problem is they don't put any stock at all. Even if you did like a PhD, researching certain types of stem cells, they'll discount all of those grades and experience, and it's partly because of that, because half the people who are hiring were people who went to university, didn't show up to any classes, drank the whole way through, and got a girlfriend, all these sorts of things. People consider, I think it's changing a little bit, but certainly up until through the bubble in the 90s, the university is kind of the flower of youth time. It's like they don't have the university entrance hell from high school, and they take, Japanese used to joke how they would expect brains to get worse during university, and then they'd go off into the world. So grades were not emphasized. Definitely where I am now, however, skills are looked at and grades are looked at. I don't like the snobbishness of university rankings, but certainly a lot of big companies do that, particularly when you're just trying to process and differentiate a lot of people. But they'll look at universities first and grades second. So the prestige of the university you're going to still counts. I mean, depending on the company that you're going to, unless it's a really specialist thing. I think there is really a trend towards looking for skills in people coming out of universities now, particularly with things like cloud skills and computer engineering and whatnot. The old idea of doing a degree in linguistics and not showing up to any of your classes and then joining a bank. That kind of thing is happening less than it happened in the past. So I hope the skills are relevant. Damien323, who's the best J vlogger? I don't know, but you've got a handle name I don't recognize, so welcome to the chat, and let everybody else decide that. And cute robot, so I like that. The captain of the Mauritius oil spill ship was arrested. Apparently, if he had just stuck to the course that he was supposed to be on, I mean, you talk about what they should have been. These little robots, they should have been making them the captain of these, tanker ships. Or not, it wasn't a tanker ship, it was actually a trading vessel, but it had a lot of fuel on board. The reason they ran aground, it seems like, was that they went close to a national park because somehow they were expecting to get better Wi-Fi signals or catch a Wi-Fi signal to be able to get better internet. So they actually steered the ship off course. They rammed them towards the coast and did this. So the captain's been arrested. So I gave Panama a hard time about the sort of loose shipping regulations and the flagging of ships the other week. But no, it appears that the captain on this was just a doofus who actually went and ran the ship aground and destroyed the environment in Mauritius because he wanted a better Wi-Fi signal. Starlink, SpaceX, they've launched all the swarm of constellation of satellites, and so I know some people are complaining it's going to ruin the night skies. And as an astronomy geek, I worry about that a little bit. But I think the idea that you'll be on these ships or on an airplane like the Malaysian Airlines plane, and you'll never be out of connection with the internet ever again, and you'll be able to track everything sort of everywhere if you want to, and not have to crash on a reef and have a disaster like this to get better Wi-Fi. These are things that living on a remote farm or in the central Australia and being able to get a high-speed internet connection. These things are all awesome. I'm looking forward to have more people watching this from parts of the world that can't access it right now, and that is the thing. Tokyo 503. You don't have to be polite. Chris Broad is awesome, and he actually has production quality. His things are like watching a real TV show, including charismatic hosts. Which, I'm quite comfortable doing what I'm doing. But Chris Broad is actually doing really cool things. Good choice. Good suggestion there. Women hold 8% of manager jobs, far from the 2020 goal of 30%. Now, I'd love to talk about this at length. I'm not going to talk about it at length, but this has been a challenge. I've been working in big companies, and I know that companies are seriously trying to do this. It's tough. It's not simply a matter of, okay, let's just take woman A, B, C, D, and just cram them into the roles and meet our quota. I mean, this is kind of, you do have quotas in a way. Partly there's an expectation problem, both on the part of the people who do the promoting and on the people who are being promoted. Like women, if they don't see any women managers, they don't aspire to be women managers, they don't want to be managers sometimes. And sometimes when you thrust them into the role and they're not ready for it, then you have a problem that you have these examples of bad managers, and it kind of taints the pool as well. So you've got this problem that you need to prepare women and sort of bring them up into these roles. And it can be counterproductive to do it when they don't want to do it or they're not ready. But at the same time, if you don't push it and sort of deliberately do it and deliberately push ahead women managers, then there's this problem as well that you're not going to overcome the cultural blockers to the thing happening. This is universal. This is happening in all countries, of course, but of course Japan is doing it much worse than other places. This is probably the danger of setting random targets a little bit as well. It's all very well to say 30%. And, like, for example, when Abe said, the Shine Japan, let's put all the women into the cabinet. And some of them seemed really great. The Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, Obuchi, I forget her first name, but she seemed very smart, snazzy. I thought, wow, this is a rising star. She seems pretty good. It turns out, I'm not sure how much of it was her, but she overtook her father, who was a former prime minister, his political machine, and they would routinely take bribes and kickbacks, and they got caught, and it was all kickbacks which were for her campaign. So basically, everybody who got promoted had to resign in scandals, a whole series of them, and there weren't any left. They got all wiped out because it turned out, even right now, there's a Kawaii, not because she's cute, that's her name, Kawaii. A woman and her husband right now from the LDP party in jail for corruption and electoral fraud. So you can't rush it, right? You have to make sure you've got the right people. You got to build it up and take time. I do think that there are sincere efforts to build things up, but clearly 8% is pretty. When the goal is 30, implies that they're not doing anything fast enough or seriously enough. So it's a hard problem, and it's not as easy to fix as you would think it is. It's like people say we should have 100% solar power. It's an easy thing to say, it's a very hard thing to achieve. But at the same time, other countries have done it, and Japan has got a lot of catching up to do, and this is a sign that things it has been doing are not enough. So, the transparent toilets, they are in Shibuya, Mulberry Pie, apparently. They're near Shibuya. If you Google them, you should be able to find them. But bear in mind, they cloud over when you're on the toilet. They don't. Of course, the immediate concern is that there might be some people who don't want to cloud it. They don't want to. So when you lock the door of the stall, it clouds. I've not seen them myself. I haven't been to Shibuya in months, but if you go to Shibuya, apparently they can be found. NonNative Creative, there was a speaker, there was a guy, Lance Stein, who's like a travel photographer guy. Interesting guy, connection to Japan. I found it interesting to hear him talking about his, he has a really strong dislike of cliches, which is kind of funny. He likes Japan, and he loves photography, and he's a professional photographer, and he's got a really interesting Instagram, but he hates photographic cliches about Japan, which is, like, it's on the one hand, of course, he's like the Blade Runner look of purple lights. Well, I like the purple lights Blade Runner look, even though of course it's nothing like Japan. He's like, Japan is not purple. And yeah, but it looks better when it is like that, the neon thing. And he was also talking about how he was going on a little bit about how he hates how people show the tori, the gates and the mon and all this sort of stuff. And on the one hand, like, he doesn't want to do cliched photography of Japan, and he's a pro and he's very good at it. But on the other hand, sometimes you can't avoid it, because it's Japan. There's just going to be a tori there sometimes, and you'll be accused of it. So I kind of loved his tortured look into how to avoid being cliched in a country that they're everywhere. This is the problem as well. Dogen is awesome. His Twitter is awesome as well. Good recommendation, Christopher Luke. Kangen Kodos, your wife is getting asked to take her boss's job when he retires. Yeah, well, this is the thing, and it's good that these opportunities are opening up, and they're opening up disproportionately. And remember as well, you've got it's the expectations of women as well, that they would just do a job for a few years, not take it too seriously, marry someone in the company, become a housewife. This was society's expectations, which, right or wrong, have been accepted by a lot of people in time as well. So, the pool of people who stay and are sort of eligible or even interested in becoming managers is so small. This is what I've seen, particularly in IT companies, which are really male-dominated. And, everywhere I've worked has been really aggressive about pushing people into these roles, but often, they've never had that expectation or the desire. And being a manager in Japan is tough. So it's a tough issue. 3 minutes over, I'm going to push through. The rolling 7-day average, it still is not good. We're having about 200-something cases a day. The rolling 7-day average, this is from a few days ago, 258. It's probably lower than that now, so it is coming down. That's good news for Tokyo, but it is still high. So not getting better. I had a moment this week, which I shared on the internet, and the internet seemed to like it and reshare it. It was, I was walking out the building to go outside, and when I was outside, I felt the air on my face. And I was like, something's not right. So, I'm not wearing a mask. Oh my god. And that was like, yes, it felt like leaving the house without trousers on, and I sort of rushed back hurriedly, covering my face. This is pretty much how used I am now to like leaving. It's like pretty much a spacesuit, isn't it, wearing the mask. In Tokyo, that's definitely what I do. You've probably all seen the news that Japan's Ninja Museum has been robbed by thieves in the middle of the night. I haven't actually read anything more than the headline. I don't think it's necessary. That's like headline of the week. Who knows? I mean, of course, the security, we should look at the security camera footage, because if the people were actually captured on the film, then they could not have been ninjas, because ninjas actually move in 45 frames per second or faster, whereas most security footage is mostly 25 or 29.97 frames per second. So, yeah, if they were able to catch the people, they wouldn't be ninjas, but you'd have to suspect that it was an inside job. Really good documentary, which I shared the other day. Link down there somewhere. You can see it there in the tweet. Fantastic, really long documentary on the history of Taiwan, but the complete history of Taiwan, well, going up to 1998, so it missed out 20 years, which is actually quite a lot. But what it did was like amazing. It was really, really good to watch, actually, if you're into Taiwan. The minimum wage is being raised all over Japan. I didn't actually realize this before. The minimum wage in Japan varies prefecture to prefecture. Some prefectures they're increasing the minimum wage by 1 yen some by 2 yen and some by 3 yen. So for example, the highest minimum wage in Japan is in Tokyo, where you get 1,013 yen per hour, which is about $9. The worst in Japan is in 7 prefectures, 792 yen in Akita, Tottori, Shimane, Kochi, Shiga, Saga, Oita, and Okinawa. Of course, cost of living is a lot cheaper there, so even on the lower hourly wage, you can probably do a lot better. And of course, a lot of agricultural jobs, but I thought that was interesting if you're thinking about coming and picking fruit in Japan. What's this about? Oh yeah, the Ministry of Justice, which also runs immigration, lost 902 applications for Japanese citizenship over the last 25 years. I love The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. There's a line in that play that I like when someone says, tell me about your parents. He says, I have lost both my parents. And the sort of snobby woman says, to have lost one of your parents may be considered a misfortune, but to have lost both your parents rather sounds like carelessness. And I like to apply that quote to this news story. I think losing one citizenship application may be considered a misfortune, but losing 902, that's carelessness by the Ministry of Justice. Oh, yeah, this was a whole thing. I could have talked about this for half an hour. The Ministry of Environment, MOE for short, which is moe, which if you know about Japan stuff, moe is like the genre of people that like kind of sexy, underaged girl cartoons. Apparently this was part of the reason they thought this would be a good idea for a mascot, for a logo for the Ministry of Environment. Obviously they are hoping to encourage sustainability among people that want to be able to marry their pillow. This is immediately upsetting a lot of a lot of people on Twitter, and it's kind of like I imagine the moe, the moe MOE thing, that probably seemed like a good idea for about 5 seconds, and obviously no one was brave enough to tell Senpai they shouldn't take it any further, but apparently they did. They published this. They have these profiles like this, and people are upset, and it's kind of funny. It's wrong. It's funny in a wrong way. Also, another case involving, I've talked about last year, there was a case of a number of plaintiffs, including 2 foreign plaintiffs and a number of Japanese plaintiffs, taking the Japanese government to court, saying that the lack of a family law system with joint custody in the cases of divorce is unconstitutional. That case was struck down by the Japanese Supreme Court last year. However, there was another case being brought to the Tokyo District Court from a couple of weeks ago, with 11 plaintiffs Japanese. This is what people complain about Japan. The reason that a parent can kidnap a child in a custody dispute, take them to Japan, is Japan doesn't have any system for recognizing joint custody. So, even if you've got a custody order, there's no enforcement for it in Japan. And again, they're saying that the lack of that constitutes child abuse and violation of the Constitution. So that will be an interesting court case to watch. And the Japanese government's been kind of signaling, they haven't really announced, but they've signaled that they are going to allow people with permanent residency like myself, who have been outside of Japan, something like 90,000 people, to come back into Japan. Part of the reason that they've done this and it's taken so long is that they have not had the facilities. They're actually going to set up facilities around Osaka and the Kansai and Narita airports for COVID testing stations that will be able to do 10,000 tests per day. So they should be able to handle all the people coming back in. They should have had this months and months and months ago. They should have had this framework. They didn't have it, and that was part of the reason that they were trying to keep people out, although they were allowing Japanese from overseas to return. They're predictable, a few idiots, but not a lot of idiots, but a few people responding to this in Japanese, saying we can't let foreigners into the country. But these are not foreigners, these are Japan residents. I mean, they're foreign nationals, but most people don't really understand what they're talking about, which is why I like the fact that immigration in Japan is not highly politicized. Another person who's good to follow on Twitter, Tobias Harris, has published a book on Abe, which, he's just this week become the longest serving Japanese Prime Minister, so that's a thing. He's been a bit AWOL lately, but still, someone who knows. If you like Langley Esquire, you've got another very knowledgeable person who's published a book. These videos lately, there's been a few of these, like restoring really, really old video footage. Will this be able to show on the screen? It might not. I wonder if I rotate this. Well, you can see. So there's the original sort of clunky footage, and like they colorize it, and basically they get it super smooth. It's just really cool that they're able to like speed it up to 60 frames per second. It looks like somebody shot this now, and this is like 105 years old in Tokyo. So I find these videos. There's a lot of these like scenes from Tokyo. So you can look this up. Views of Tokyo, Japan, 1913 to 15. Just fascinating, actually. It looks so different, as you'd expect. Also, this documentary, which I could have talked about at length, but I'm not going to. Mark Felton, history, mainly war history, but he does really good, very well researched documentaries. And this documentary, speaking for more than an hour about World War II Japanese brutality. I guess when you're in Japan, and we talk a lot about how much Japan suffered and how much the war sucked for Japan, and how Japan became convinced that war is just something you should never do. And that seems like a good story, but there isn't actually very much coverage other than talking about Unit 731 and a few other sort of things. There's not a lot of it's kind of funny. It's like some Japanese people, that when you talk about controversial history, they'll talk about the Nanking Massacre, and there's a whole industry around contesting details of that story, as if that's the only problem. There are so many incidents of just crazy, brutality that happened, and this documentary goes into a lot of depth, not just about those incidents, but about how Japan got to that place, including the building up and the modernization of the military by Prussian instruction. A lot of stuff I didn't know about that was really interesting. A lot of background setting about the political and military situation in Japan in the 19th century and the 20th century leading up to the war. There are little bits and pieces there that I sort of knew were sort of contested bits and pieces, but overall this was actually a really good documentary, and I think as someone who's lived in Japan for 22 years, it's important to keep up to speed on that sort of stuff. So this was the Mark Felton Japanese Military Brutality Explained. It's a good video. I am enjoying right now watching on Netflix High Score. What I love about it is that it's frequently including, there's a lot of Japanese culture, again, like The Toys That Made Us, another great series. So much about video games and so much about toys and stuff. This is Japanese culture, which has been successfully imported into America and then made global from America, but it's Japanese culture. And the original creators, again, are humble people getting hazed by their bosses at these video game companies, but they are, they're not rich, they're not, they're not famous, they weren't seeking either. They're just, they're not bragging about their stories, but the documentary makers have found them out, and they're just humble, cool guys who invented, and women who invented these things. And, and they became these things that we have, that I certainly grew up with, and that have influenced so many people now, have grown up. People my age and younger have grown up with video, influenced by video games, as by books, or movies, like culturally. And it's, as we all know, Japan's been a huge contributor to that. So to me, this is this is another really well done series in that vein, and it's good to, not just from, you don't have to be into video games to appreciate it, just from a cultural perspective, and from a Japanese cultural perspective, it's a great series. Go to Japan is causing more COVID-19 cases. That's the show. I'm 13 minutes over, but thank you everybody for putting in so many great comments. Actually, we had a good. I like the side discussions, and I appreciate people for doing that. BTC Chiba, boom! Glad that you made it. Odie Junior, excellent to see you. Aaron, yeah, I'm very happy to share. This is what I like to do. There's not a lot of news, but there's a lot of interesting stuff out there, and I love to share it with you all. And if 2 more people follow me on Flipboard, I get like 1,000 followers. Not that I'm hung up on the numbers, but it's only 2 more people to be 1,000. So that'd be kind of awesome. So of course you can follow. I share all of this is made up from my Twitter feed. So you can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Flipboard to keep up. Quickly trying to see if I can catch people who were. Damien323. Do I still stream with Victor? I would like to stream with Victor, but we both have kind of busy lives. But it's something that I'm sure we'll get around to doing. It was good. Victor was in the comments earlier, so that was nice to see. Anyone else here? I'm sure I missed some comments. Way late, but late boom indeed. Good to have you here, Odie Jr. Look, excellent to have everyone here. JMac. And everyone else. I'm sorry if there's anyone I didn't get to shout out, but excellent to talk to you as usual. I tried going fast, but I couldn't get through it. I do want to get this down to 50 minutes so I can make a track live like I used to. I miss doing that a little bit lately, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed the show. Remember, if you like the content, click on like, it helps. And yeah, love the comments today. You guys awesome. This is why I come back and do this every week, and I do appreciate the questions in the middle of it. That's what it's for, right? So have a good week, everybody. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter. Stay safe, take care, and yeah, ka kite no, peace. Boom. Over here. Boom. Have a good one. Steve from Berkeley. Most underrated show on the internet. Thank you. 3 demerits for showing up late, and how many demerits before expulsion? No, you can watch it recorded and tell your mum. I remember actually once seeing somebody beg people to get their mothers to subscribe. No, you don't have to make your mother subscribe. That's okay. Glad that you made it. Have a good week, everybody. Peace.